Welcome back. Now, there are calls for companies to improve their bullying policies to include social media bullying. Experts define social media bullying as the use of online platforms to intimidate, humiliate or demean colleagues. Now, to tell us more about the impact of social media bullying in one's ability to do their jobs, I am now joined by Dr. Linda Meyer, who is the Managing Director at Rosebank College. A very good evening to you, Dr. Meyer. If you could just please start by just painting this picture. Bullying is nothing new. It's been with us since the beginning of time, one might even say. But now stretching it onto social media and the impact on employees. Paint that picture for us, please.
Good evening. Yes, so what we've seen traditionally, and you're quite right, it has been with us since the beginning of time, where people start to take advantage of other individuals and try to demean them through particular behaviors. So traditionally, we saw this in the workplace through forms of social isolation, for example, intimidation, interference, character assassination, simple things like leaving notes or anonymous emails are now starting to rear its head. So really, the picture that we see now is that social media is becoming a very strong platform to intimidate employees. And we can see this through, digital harassment. We see, for example, where employees' profiles and their personal information is placed on social media platforms, where people create fake profiles and leave the employees' contact details on sex sites, for example, and a lot of intimidation and humiliating demeanor that is placed on their social media through this anonymous and fake profiles that employees now need to endure.
So, Dr. Meyer, how can employers then get involved? Say, for instance, employees or an employee is on social media bullying another employee using their device from the comfort of their own homes. What's the role of the employer then?
Well, the first thing is obviously to have a strong policy that allows employers to do particular things. So when somebody signs, for example, their employment contract, they need to understand and sign and agree to the policy framework that prevents this sort of behavior. So humiliating any fellow employee on social media, cyber stalking, sharing personal information, trolling or creating fake profiles. Employers have very sophisticated systems, and especially if it's a large employer, where they can track these IP addresses and really introduce remedial action. Because we must also understand that this is a criminal offense. Each of these actions has an element of criminality that is known to us. So really to understand and to educate the workforce to ensure that their policies, their employment contracts are rock solid, so that when this behavior rears its head, that the employer can deal with it decisively.
And are you finding from your experience that employers are keeping up with it and putting up policies to prevent this?
Well, yes, there are some employers that are keeping up with times, but we know that people get busy. So there are employers that are not doing this. But it's important for them to take the time, not only to strengthen their policies, but to ensure that they do the necessary education campaigns in their businesses, that managers are adequately trained to deal with these situations, that employees have a reporting mechanism, and that this is communicated to the business, and that employees are trained on what steps to take if they are subjected to this particular type of behavior.
And you've mentioned as well, Dr. Meyer, that the consequences on the employee that's being bullied online as well are far-reaching. Take us through some of those consequences.
Well, if there's any sort of character assassination, we see that employee, and naturally, this is a natural reaction, that they would manifest through stress in the workplace, anxiety, depression, booking off sick, feeling like they need to find a different job. Really, this character assassination can become very serious, and it can lead to serious bouts of depression. And we've seen that some employees have taken their own lives because of sustained harassment that they've been subjected to. So really, to ensure that employees also understand the manifestation, the symptoms that will emerge once they go through this particular framing. And HR departments, once that is brought to their attention, must have adequate psychosocial support mechanisms in place to support the employee through this entire process until the perpetrators or perpetrator is found.
So it really is a life and death matter that we're talking about here. It does have the potential, as you're saying, to be fatal, where in some cases employees then opt to take their own lives.
Absolutely. Obviously, different people deal with stress differently,
Yeah.
but it's documented. It's documented that for some employees it became so bad that they felt that there was no other alternative. And it is a very serious matter. And because one person finds, it's a flippant event for them, they thick-skinned and they can deal with it and move on. The vast majority of people do have a sense of discomfort and disempowerment when they are subjected to this particular harassing behavior.
Earlier, you mentioned social isolation as well. Do you mind just explaining that to us?
Well, historically, what we would see is that employees that were victimized all other employees would stop speaking to them. They would and we see this in modern times being manifested where employees are left out of email communication. They're left out of social events in the workplace. They're not invited to tea and coffee breaks or when people are going out for lunch, social events. So this isolation of individuals is a really orchestrated and a constructed method to make people feel that they don't belong to the social groups. And this is hard for people to understand. And certainly in our modern workplaces, this is behavior that is not acceptable. So certainly people can be friends, but when there is a group that is taking a proactive stance or an individual that is really victimizing and excluding someone, this social isolation has detrimental effects to the employees' psychosocial well-being.
So, for instance, when we look at things like WhatsApp groups, right, and you're mentioning as well that, people can be friends as well, people can connect and have chemistry with different people as well. If in an organization, let's say in one department, all the women get along and they decide we're going to have our own little women's WhatsApp group, can the men then use that and say this is social isolation or any other, form of group that decides to club together?
Well, we know from legislation that minority groups and groups that have a special interest are allowed to have their own groups. But in the workplace, where we see that there is a particular group or individual that are targeted. So let's say, for example, all the white people, for example, have a group, or all the black people decide to have a group. That is completely unacceptable because that is racism at its core. But if the females decide they're going to have a girls' club and they're going out every other Friday and they speak about things that doesn't, break down a particular man or men's agenda in the workplace, and it really is just an innocent coffee club or whatever that is, that would be fine. But as soon as it becomes isolating people, targeting them, victimizing, attacking their character in an orchestrated manner, that is completely unacceptable and will not be, viewed as acceptable, be it through the CCMA or be it through a labour court or any other procedure that somebody would take action through.
And just finally, as South Africa, we have quite a number of laws that are there in place to protect people, also employees, against things like this. We've got the Labour Relations Act, the Employment Equity Act, the Protection from Harassment Act, and the PIA as well, and more. Do you find, Dr. Meyer, that these laws, while they are there and they are in place, they are actually being implemented as well on the ground when it comes to these organizations?
Although we have all of this legislation, and that's an excellent question, we find that employers aren't always knowledgeable about the types of legislation. You've mentioned quite a few, and there's the Electronic Communication and Transactions Act, the South African Constitution in Chapter 2 that protects all employees from unfair labor practices. So employers need to understand that they've got a positive obligation, first of all, to know the legislation, but to create a workplace that is not hostile, is conducive to positive work enforcements by the employees, because as much as we have common law rights that employees need to give to the employer reciprocally has rights and duties and obligations that they need to meet. And key to this is to ensure that the employees are protected, that they work in a safe and conducive environment. And safe and conducive is not just about the physical environment. It's about all of the behaviors that employees need to be protected from. And the days are gone where we can just have this covert, harassing and victimizing mentality, where we just say people must get over it. There is a positive obligation on everybody in the workforce to work collegially and not to bully or victimize anybody in the workplace.
Dr. Meyer, thank you so much for your time this evening. That was
so much for
Linda Meyer, who is the Managing Director at Rosebank College.